Señores, en los últimos días hay dos cosas que se están volviendo cada vez más claras en esta administración. La incompetencia, que ya es su sello personal, la intimidación, que está escalando a niveles realmente preocupantes. Y es que Donald Trump sabe que está perdiendo en los tribunales. Él sabe muy bien que su apoyo está cayendo. Y sin duda sabe que su agenda no pasará por el Congreso. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que hace? Recurre al miedo, recurre a presionar, a intimidar. Todo esto para poder forzar su agenda, aunque ésta sea ilegal e inmoral. Un ejemplo muy claro de esto es Pam Bondi. Hablamos de una figura clave que ha estado violando la ley en sus intentos de intimidar a los opositores. Lo peor es que hasta ella fue confrontada por Adam Schiff en el Congreso. Y antes de, lógicamente, mostrarles este enfrentamiento, quiero que vean cómo fue su increpada en nada más y nada menos que Fox News. ¿Y cuál fue su reacción?
If I could just finish off with this idea, very significant development that you're arresting judges now. Now, it could be that the judges have engaged in terribly bad behavior and deserve to be arrested. But you know what critics will say? They'll say, "Oh, this is a government that is expanding the powers of the Article 1 of the Constitution. Now they're arresting judges." How do you respond to that?
No one is above the law, John. No one is above the law in this country. And if you are destroying evidence, if you are obstructing justice, when you have victims sitting in a courtroom of domestic violence and you're escorting a criminal defendant out a back door, it will not be tolerated, and it is a crime in the United States of America. Doesn't matter who you are, you're going to be prosecuted.
Madam Attorney General, great to see you in the studio.
Great to see you.
Okay.
Y es que, amigos, Pam Bondi aparece en Fox tanto que ya me sorprende que no le hayan dado su propio programa. Es impresionante la cantidad de tiempo que pasa en ese canal de propaganda trumpista. Pues bueno, mientras Pam Bondi parece tener un pase libre para poder hablar con Fox cada vez que quiere, lo verdaderamente alarmante es que incluso en Fox se atrevieron a presionarla con preguntas muy serias, como ser el tema del arresto de jueces, sobre las amenazas contra congresistas demócratas, sobre las detenciones sin el debido proceso. Es más, incluso Alina Habba dijo que iba a procesar a cualquier persona que intentara supervisar el centro de detención de agentes migratorios en Newark. Una locura absoluta. Todo esto es parte del mismo patrón de intimidación. Si es que les suena conocido, es porque, amigos, es el tipo de abuso que Trump acusaba falsamente a Biden de hacer, pero que hoy por hoy él mismo está aplicándolo sin pudor. Es lo único que le queda. Sabe que su única forma de avanzar es hacer que la gente tenga miedo. Como no están logrando las cifras que supuestamente querían de deportaciones, montan un circo, asustar a quienes podrían oponerse. Pero bueno, hay que denunciarlo, y uno que lo está haciendo muy bien es el senador Adam Schiff, el cual le dio una tremenda paliza política a Pam Bondi frente al Congreso. Escuchemos.
Observation that with so many of these nominees, our hope for how they will perform has been betrayed by the realization of how they've actually conducted themselves in office once confirmed. But I share some optimism about Mr. Seralta, based on what I've heard of him and his testimony, his experience. I would add to the challenges he will face that not only is it going to be necessary to continue to vigorously protect judges who are under greater threats than ever and their families, but it's also going to be more important than ever to make sure that court orders are given effect, which is a primary responsibility of the Marshal's Service, which brings me to two oversight investigation requests I want to make to add to Senator Booker's requests. The first goes right to the heart of the necessity of looking into the violation of court orders. We have another federal judge yesterday ruling that the Trump administration is violating court orders. This with the deportation flights to Sudan. The court finding this in direct violation of its order. I think it is also in direct violation of the Supreme Court's order. It may, in the case of the district court order, be a criminal contempt of that court. How often is this going to go on that the administration violates court orders after nominees come in here and promise, oh, it'll never come up, we'll never violate court order? How could you even ask or suggest such a thing? How long is this going to go on before we as the Judiciary Committee say something, do some oversight of this? If we're going to wait for the Supreme Court to act, they're probably never going to act. When it comes to standing up to the Trump administration, they are a total paper tiger. When these cases reach the Supreme Court, as they have already, the Supreme Court will look for every opportunity not to confront the administration, not to put the administration to the test of just saying to the Supreme Court, buzz off. We need to do oversight of the willful and deliberate decision to violate court orders in this country. Second, I would request an oversight hearing into the weaponization of Pam Bondi's Justice Department and the weaponization of their Office of Weaponization. Seeing in the first hand their unprecedented interference to dismiss the case against Eric Adams, a serious corruption case, and now seeing the flip side of that, the leaked report that their inquiry into or investigation of Andrew Cuomo. It could not be more obvious they are using the Justice Department as now an instrument of their political will. And with that, I've got to go vote, and I will yield back.
Y es que este tipo de abusos de poder es exactamente lo que el movimiento MAGA decía temer. Por lo que según ellos hay que defender a toda costa la segunda enmienda. Amigos, no podemos evitar que un joven de 18 años compre un rifle semiautomático y miles de balas porque ¿y si el gobierno se vuelve tiránico? Y sin embargo, pues ahora sí estamos viendo un gobierno actuando de forma tiránica y a ellos no les importa. Están deportando a ciudadanos, están encarcelando a gente sin juicio, están celebrando desfiles militares para el cumpleaños del presidente. Pero los mismos que gritaban sobre la libertad ahora guardan silencio. ¿Por qué? Porque no tienen principios. Pam Bondi, que es o fue fiscal general, está metida en tráfico de influencias, está en acciones especulativas con el tema de las memes stocks de Trump. O sea, ¿de verdad alguien cree que esa mujer respeta el Estado de Derecho? Menos mal que Adam Schiff no ha parado de desenmascararla, ¿no? Implacable. No es el único que está poniendo el dedo en la llaga. También vimos al congresista Mark Buchan, otro gran comunicador del Partido Demócrata, denunciar a Linda Mahon por las irregularidades legales dentro de su propio departamento. Veamos ese momento.
Did you fire the people or did DOGE fire the people? I'm not completely clear on that.
Most of that restructuring happened under the acting.
Short term, did you fire or did DOGE fire?
Well, I'm going to tell you who I fired.
I know, that's why I'm trying to get short term questions.
The
It's
short
one or
term
the
is-
other, right?
Well, you're using our time.
Yeah.
So most of that was done before I came on board. However, the
DOGE.
decisions in the department I run the department. DOGE does not run the
Okay,
department.
so you didn't answer the question. Did you fire them or did DOGE? It's real simple.
A good majority of that happened before I came on board.
Okay, and by a good majority, 2/3, 3/4?
But yes, I'd say.
Okay, fair, okay. And how many times did you meet with Elon Musk
I've
about
met
firing?
with Mr. Musk probably 3 to 4 times now.
Okay,
Not including when I was on the transition committee and had several opportunities to speak with him.
sure. And then if I understand it right, on your Department of Education employee roster, you have right now at least is about 16 DOGE employees, is that correct right now, working with you?
I can get back to you to the exact number. I don't think it's that high. But we
Okay.
do have, they are employees. Those that we have are employees of the federal
And when
government.
you did their background checks to see how they're qualified about education, how many had undergraduate degrees and how many had graduate degrees in
I
education?
can get back to you on that.
Okay, so you don't know offhand?
No,
Did you ask that question?
no.
No, okay. Did you ask if any of them were teachers previously?
I did not interview those people that are part of the
Okay.
DOGE group.
And did you ask if any of them worked in schools? Did you know if they were
Actually, I had a
asked?
conversation with one of them yesterday who did have a background in education, technology education, and had worked across several different aspects and was really schooling me a little bit on some of the AI things that we could bring in.
So one of them had a good background, good. Any of them work in universities that you know of prior?
I don't know.
Okay. Fair enough. So part of my concern is, I know yesterday there was this big splash, Elon Musk is stepping back. We call that horse hockey where I come from, right? We know it's not real. He's in the back closet. I understand you guys don't want his, front and center, but he's still in the room. And he's still making a lot of these decisions. And that's the real problem that I have is, you've got a bunch of folks that he brought in that you've admitted you didn't hire, you don't know their backgrounds if they have anything in education, yet they're helping you fire half of your employees right now. And I'm really concerned about that. Do you know if any of them have requested or gained access to any sensitive data held by the department, including student loan borrower data?
Well, as government employees now, they have been vetted through the same process than any other government employee would. And so what access would be granted to other government employees they have.
That's fine. And then do you know the number of people that you've had to reinstate of those fired?
It's about 74.
About 74. So how did that happen? Because, I've been an employer for 37 years. The dumbest thing I could possibly do is fire someone just to rehire them, right? Because you've given them no job security. It's like beyond stupid, right? Not saying that because you didn't do it. Clearly, it sounds like this is from Elon Musk. But how did that happen, that people got fired and no one thought of you might need them in your department?
Some of that did happen when I returned.
Okay.
Now, I was in the private sector. I have done restructuring in firms, and it's painful to do that.
Yeah. But
And
fire people
wait,
to rehire them?
well, here's the thing.
Like usually that's not a strategy.
When you are restructuring in a company, you hope that you're just cutting fat. Sometimes you cut a little in the muscle, and you realize it as you're continuing with your programs, and you can bring people back to do that.
Yeah.
So
Or
that's
you
what
can
we
plan
did.
ahead and not fire people to rehire them, right? That would be another strategy that I think is more often used. Would you agree?
Well, I'm saying that I have been on both sides of that coin, and I found them both to be effective.
Okay, interesting. We have a different perspective on that, but maybe the world of all-star wrestling is different than my world of business to business. You talked about, and I agree with you, about contracts enriching private contractors at public expense. Does Elon Musk have any contracts with the Department of Education?
First of all, I just
It's
need
a simple question,
well,
please.
not
This
that I
is
know
my
of.
time. I have 38 seconds, please,
Well,
Madam
I don't
Secretary.
know if he does or not.
You don't know if Elon Musk has any contracts in your department, and you've met with him multiple times?
Elon Musk doesn't have contracts in my department.
So Department of Education, there are no contracts with any Elon Musk company. That's what I'm asking.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. All right. You want to check a blue card real quick, or are you pretty sure of that?
I said not to my knowledge.
Okay.
If I find out differently, I'll be happy to get back to you.
All right. And just in the last few seconds I have, just real quick on private schools getting public dollars, just so you know, something like 3/4 of the students that wind up going into those schools already attend those schools, and they're getting tax money. So if we get rid of the Department of Education, should we put the private voucher program under Ways and Means because it's really more of a tax benefit?
Y es que no es nada nuevo, ¿cierto? Los aliados de Trump que dicen defender la ley y el orden son los primeros en pisotearla. Bueno amigos, pasemos al siguiente tema. Y es que, resulta que Trump y los suyos han estado impulsando esta nueva propuesta legislativa, ¿no? Como bien sabemos, este hermoso, ¿no? y gran proyecto de ley. Este gran y hermoso proyecto de ley, si es que lo miramos bien, más parece una estafa. Como bien sabemos, este proyecto de ley ya pasó en la Cámara de Representantes por un solo voto. Y en este momento ya está camino al Senado. Aunque sea un trámite político aburrido, es algo muy importante, amigos, porque esto podría afectar directamente tu bolsillo, tu salud y el futuro económico del país. Veamos de qué se trata.
New analysis now of President Trump's One Big Beautiful bill as it heads to the Senate floor after passing the House by one vote this week. So take a look at this chart. That longest line there is how much the bill would increase income for the wealthiest 0.1% of Americans, while actually reducing income for the poorest 10%. This is according to Penn's Wharton School of Business. It also would drastically raise the deficit, and that's putting some Republicans on edge.
This will be the greatest increase in the debt ceiling ever, and GOP owns this now.
Senator, some of your House colleagues said the same thing, that they're not going to support the bill because it adds too much to the deficit, but then they ended up voting for it. Do you think the president could put pressure on you and others?
I'm not persuadable to go against the principles of conservative government.
Michael Hardaway and Brendan Buck are back with me. So welcome, guys. Michael, we're going to get to the Senate battle in just a moment. But first, what is your initial reaction to this bill getting through the House in the middle of the night by one vote? Were you surprised at the number of Republicans that were persuaded to sign on to this level of Medicaid cuts?
What a disaster. You know the bill is bad when they hold all of these meetings in the dead of night. I think that, the fact that several Republicans who claim to have issues with the bill ultimately surrendered is not surprising. I think that what Rand Paul just said is interesting because if he's telling the truth, he'd be one of a few deficit hawks left in the Republican Party. You've got a $36 trillion national debt that no one seems to care about anymore, and that is incredibly problematic for the future of this country.
Brendan, this bill raises the deficit by $2 to $3, almost $4 trillion, depending on the estimate you're looking at. If it passes, have Republicans lost any right to complain about the deficit, or has that already been kicked off the GOP platform? I mean, it was there with traditional Republicans, those that preceded the era of Donald Trump, but are they there now?
I feel the need to put this in a little bit of context. So we're talking about very expensive tax cuts. In reality, these are an extension of what people are already paying. And I think we've talked about this before. While Donald Trump talks about this as the biggest tax cut in history, for most people, it is just keeping your tax rates the same. Now, there is a cost to that. Of course, the law expects the tax rates for everybody to go up, and therefore we're not getting all of that revenue. I think what's important to point out here is it was also the position of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to extend almost all of these tax cuts. And so when we talk about there being a $3 or $4 trillion increase to the deficit, while legitimate, and I think we should talk about that, I don't have a whole lot of tolerance for Democrats throwing their hands up in there and saying this is terrible when their policy was to extend the vast majority of that. And maybe it was $1 trillion generously that they were going to allow to expire, but they certainly weren't going to try to offset it. So I think if Democrats were in charge, we would have probably the exact same deficit number. Now, should we be more concerned about the deficit? Yes, I do personally do work on fiscal responsibility and think that we should take this a lot more seriously. And that's one of my frustrations with the party is everyone's going after Medicaid because they're so unwilling to make any tough decisions on other programs like Medicare and Social Security that need reform. And we end up in a situation where they are understandably, I think, extending the tax cuts, which have a cost, but have nowhere to look for offsets other than Medicaid, which is just a terrible political dynamic. Because as you said, the way that this ends up playing out for especially the lower income people is just really bad. So I just want to get that off my chest. And this is a bipartisan problem that we've had for many, many years.
Fair. So, Michael, the bill has to pass the Senate where it faces a bit of a math problem. There's room for 3 Republicans to vote no and then still have that bill pass. But right now, we have numerous GOP senators who have problems with it. You have Josh Hawley, doesn't want to cut the Medicaid benefits for his constituents. 4 Republicans don't want to axe the clean energy tax credits. And then there were a few Republicans, again, like we heard Rand Paul there, who thinks it doesn't cut enough and it adds too much to the deficit. Can Democrats exploit these conflicts, or will Senate Republicans fall in line like their House colleagues did? You heard my colleague Julie Sirkin asking that question of Rand Paul.
I think Democrats should exploit this. I don't think they will. And I do think ultimately that handful of Senate Republicans will surrender and they'll kowtow to this. The reality is that, for instance, the SALT tax and raising that is needed because blue states pay more money into the treasury that keeps this country running than do red states in the South. That is a fact. It is also a fact that you need these clean energy tax credits to help America win the future. We should protect those things, but I think ultimately Senate Republicans will surrender to Donald Trump as they typically do, and we'll have these horrific cuts for Medicaid and elsewhere. It's a shame, too, because the reality is that Medicaid is wildly popular and necessary. 97% of Americans say that they are affected by Medicaid or they know someone that is. And the overwhelming majority of those people are either working or cannot work. You only have about 6 to 7% of people on Medicaid who are able-bodied and don't work. And so there is no reason to attack Medicaid except, grandmas who need Medicaid don't have lobbyists. And that's why we have this.
Brendan, what changes might we see to this bill before it can get through the Senate?
I don't think a lot. Michael said they're going to surrender to Trump. I think they're probably just going to surrender to reality. There were a lot of Republicans in the House who wanted to do different things, wanted to cut spending deeper, wanted changes in tax policy. And this is just really, I think, the equilibrium. Now, Will they tinker around on Medicaid? Will they tinker around on some of those green tax credits? Maybe. But there just certainly isn't $5 trillion of spending cuts like Senator Ron Johnson said he wants that you can find that have the votes. So I think they will probably, once they've sort of been on the sidelines, and once they take a closer look at it, I think they'll realize there isn't a whole lot of room to go. And so there's not a real reason to delay this. So I think they're going to vote relatively quickly. And I think with the House passed, it'll look very similar to the final piece of legislation.
Quick before I let you go, I would love both of you to just comment on the crypto dinner Thursday night at Donald Trump's Virginia Golf Club. First to you, Michael, as you shake your head.
What a scam. I mean, the reality is that the president of the United States is setting the national and really the global.
Ok, señores. ¿Cómo vas a criticar algo por aumentar el déficit y luego sales a votar a favor? Es como decir que no te gusta el azúcar y, pues bueno, luego te comes una torta entera. Aquí es donde empieza el show de contradicciones republicanas. Ellos llevan años vendiendo la idea de que son los guardianes de la austeridad, que son los defensores de las finanzas responsables. Pero ahora te impulsan una ley que, según las estimaciones y los expertos, aumentará el déficit entre 3 y 4 billones de dólares. Es más, ellos mismos lo saben. Y claro, todo esto para compensar ese agujero. ¿Qué te quieren hacer? Recortarte el Medicaid. Porque aparentemente, en vez de cobrarle más a los millonarios que usan jets privados, prefieren quitarle la cobertura médica a la abuelita que vive con un cheque del Seguro Social. La cosa es que esto no es un error, ni un descuido de redacción. Amigos, es una estrategia. Quieren hacerle creer al votante que estos recortes son necesarios para salvar la economía, cuando en realidad están protegiendo privilegios de los más ricos a costa de los más vulnerables. Donald Trump, ¿no?, en su estilo de siempre, presionar, chantajear políticamente, utilizar influencia para que todos se alineen a su idea. Eso no es liderazgo, eso es caudillismo económico. Sé que algunos podrían salir a decirme, bueno, pero los demócratas también han apoyado extensiones de recortes fiscales antes, y sí es cierto. Pero aquí hay una diferencia clave. Los demócratas no utilizaron eso como una excusa para atacar a programas sociales, tampoco para dispararte el déficit sin tener un plan de financiamiento claro. Amigos, yo no me trago el cuento de que esta ley es una belleza. Es una jugada política que beneficia a los de siempre y que pone en riesgo a los más vulnerables. Aquí no se trata de que sos de izquierda o de que eres de derecha. Se trata de tener un mínimo de ética y coherencia. Pero bueno, ¿qué opinan ustedes? ¿Creen que este tipo de propuestas deberían ser detenidas en el Senado? ¿Creen que los republicanos en el Senado darán marcha atrás? ¿Están de acuerdo ustedes con recortar Medicaid para mantener recortes fiscales a los más ricos? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Como siempre, muchísimas gracias por acompañarme hasta el final de este video. Recuerda, dale like, compártelo con tus amigos y suscríbete a nuestro canal Políticamente en Desacuerdo. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.